Hey guys, it's Celestia. Sorry I missed last week's video. I'm currently in the middle of moving to a new city, as well as dealing with some really irritating medical issues. So while I'll try to keep up with my once per week schedule, there might be missed weeks here and there until probably mid-February. And I'll update you guys on Twitter by Thursday at the latest if there won't be a video that week. Ideally though, I'll get a few videos done in advance within the next couple days to post throughout the busiest of this stuff, so there probably won't be anything to worry about. Also, thank you so much to all the new subscribers here. I'm at around 90 subscribers now, and I know that's still an incredibly small number, but given that I started this month with 40, that's a huge deal to me. My partner's been dealing with me going feral about it at least once a day for the past week, and you guys are to thank for that. Or to blame from her perspective probably, but still. I know I usually offer 4 topics on Twitter for you guys to vote on for my next video, and that will continue other than one exception that I'll mention at the end of this video, but please feel free to comment or message me any suggestions of content that you'd like to see me discuss or create, because those can easily be added to those polls. I'm really excited to see even the smallest amount of growth on this channel, and if people are watching, I want to make what you want to see as well as what I love. Anyway, last bit before I actually get into today's topic. Today's art is the final apparel design from the winter collection that was released this December. Or last December, I guess. No. It's probably not going to be the only one of its kind, which is to say that I really love plants and greenery and pretty ladies, which means that art like today's is inevitably going to be pretty common as a theme, at least when it comes to my original art rather than my fan art. If you like the design, you can find it on t-shirts via the link to my store in the description. Alright, let's get started. Today's topic, as I'm sure you've noticed given that you clicked on the video, is why Patreon doesn't work for small creators. And right off the bat, let me say that that's a very broad statement that I don't actually think applies to everyone or every situation. Obviously, there are some small creators that can find great success on Patreon, just like any platform or business endeavor. It's just that why Patreon isn't generally successful for small creators on its own but can be in certain circumstances, I guess we're just not talking about those circumstances right now, didn't have the same ring to it as a video title. But please do know that I'm by no means bashing Patreon or saying no creator that's small will ever find success with it, or really trying to make any blanket statements at all, despite what the title may suggest. This video will really just be going over my experiences with Patreon as a small creator, the ways those experiences may apply to a lot of small creators, and my opinion on why that makes it a less viable platform if you don't already have a significant following. But again, all of that is just my opinion and my experience, and obviously others may disagree or have different experiences, which I'm not trying to ignore or minimize. I'm also aware that a lot of people have issues with the changes to Patreon as a platform, the fees and terms, the people running it, and all that, but I'm not here to talk about that today. I'm honestly not particularly well informed when it comes to those aspects, so I'm the last person who should comment, and I'll just be talking about the basic structure of the platform and its usefulness to small creators at the simplest possible level. God, okay, I spent way too long talking about what I'll be talking about without actually talking about it. Okay, so, why don't I think that Patreon works well for small creators? Well, first of all, I don't think that the platform itself is a problem. The basic system of offering monthly tiers in exchange for exclusive content isn't a bad system, and I'm not actually criticizing anything about Patreon today, because it does do exactly what it's supposed to do. The problem that I find with it as a small creator is that what it's supposed to do, charge monthly for exclusive content, doesn't really put all creators on equal footing with which to use it. That's not Patreon's fault, it's not any creator's fault, that's just how it is. To be more specific about what I mean, imagine 2 artists starting out on Patreon. One has a large following, and one has a small following. The artist with the large following already has a considerable number of people interested in their work. Not necessarily because of what that work is, but because of an interest in the artist themselves, and the fact that they made it and people are there for them. The artist with the small following has to draw potential patrons in with their work alone, without any particular draw towards them personally. Obviously, the artist with the larger following has the advantage here, because people would be willing to pay $5 a month for less exclusive content from them, largely because it's from them and they like them. Well, the smaller artist would have to offer significantly more perks to make the same $5, simply because they're selling only their work and not their identity or reputation. And to be clear, I'm not criticizing anyone with that. The larger creator in this situation has earned their position, their reputation, and the advantage that they have. The patrons have every right to prefer what they prefer and spend their money however they want. And the platform is effectively just a neutral tool to be wielded and is therefore fundamentally blameless. Obviously, excluding any issues with the terms and management, as I mentioned, but anyway. There's no one at fault here for the smaller creators being at a disadvantage. That's really just how the system works, and how most systems work. But let me get into more detail about why exactly I think that disadvantage that smaller creators have makes Patreon an ineffective platform for us to use without a following to start with, because it's not quite as simple as the disadvantage itself. To explain it better, let me share my own experience here. I tried out Patreon for a while, as a small creator with little to no following. I did a lot of research, looked at what larger artists were offering for their tiers, and tried to mimic that, and found absolutely zero success. People didn't know me, so offering just art that wouldn't be posted anywhere else, line art files, HD files, exclusive Discord servers, all that, it just wasn't enough to draw them in. Again, a huge part of the appeal of exclusive art as a perk is that you know and really enjoy the artist. And as such, it's less about the art itself and more about them. So while larger artists could offer those things for lower tiers and get patrons relatively easily, I had to offer significantly more for lower tiers, just to try to compete. By the end of it, I was giving away quite a bit of free merch monthly to patrons. I was doing at least 2 free commissions per patron every month. I was making exclusive content for patrons, and I still had very few and made next to nothing. I was working myself to the bone on top of everything I was already doing for my art career outside of Patreon, and selling myself unbelievably short just to compete with other creators on the platform. The amount I was charging for the amount of content and work that I was giving away in return for those monthly tiers was minuscule compared to what I would normally charge for those things. But it was also the standard for small creators, who had to offer more in order to be noticed and considered. And ultimately, that just was not sustainable for me. If Patreon had been my full-time job, the amount of work that I was putting into each patron's rewards would have been sustainable. But I also had to make my public content, do commissions, finish projects, and make merch. And I was making less a month from Patreon than I was from one single commission, and spending 10 times the effort and time on it. Now, part of the problem here is obviously the way that I approached it. You don't have to do things competitively on Patreon. You don't have to offer more to compete. You can always just offer what you're comfortable with and what you think you can handle, and take what you get when it comes to engagement and income. But at least in my experience, you also have to accept that that will probably mean that it'll be very slow going and you might not make anything at all for quite a while. That said, I also think that that's the best way to go, because here's my other problem with Patreon for small creators. If you try to offer more and more and more to compete with other larger creators and you keep up with that, you very well might eventually grow bigger and become very successful. But because you've grown while offering these extensive perks, despite the fact that you now do have a larger following, you have that following based at least partially on those perks, so you can't take them away or even reduce them. You're at the point where if you had started Patreon with that following, you would have been able to offer less and make more. But because you've already built your business offering more than your competitors, you're put in a very unfortunate and difficult situation. It's not like you can offer all of that competitively until you get to a certain number of patrons or followers and then reduce it all back down to what other creators with similar followings are offering. I mean, you can, obviously, but a lot of people will be pretty goddamn mad, and a lot of people will end up canceling their subscriptions. Of course, that isn't always the case, and you'll have some people who are loyal to you and really do just want to support you. But people want stuff for their money, and it's hard to blame them for that, especially when they're used to getting a certain number of things in return for it and then suddenly get less. You're assigning a value to your work that is exceptionally low in order to build a business and a following. And with this particular platform, it's very difficult to change that later on, even when you no longer need to, based on the initial disadvantage being gone that prompted you to devalue it in the first place. You're building a standard that your patrons will indefinitely expect from you. And I mean, that's also just a part of the professional artist life. Your art improves, you're in higher demand, you raise your prices. Your customers will have to deal with that, and you have every right to do it. I mean, you should do it. But commission or merch prices are different in many ways than Patreon, and I think that's in no small part because the value of your work is a lot more vague on Patreon. If you raise your commission prices, your customer sees exactly what they're getting, what they're paying for, and why the price was raised. On Patreon, let's say that for $20 a month, you offer a free commission, a shoutout, access to HD and line art files, exclusive art, exclusive tutorials, and a Discord server membership. You, as the artist, know the monetary value of all of those things individually, which, by the nature of Patreon and all monthly subscription-based platforms, will inevitably be a lot higher than what you're actually charging for it. But anyway, your customers won't. Your customers will look at the price and what they're getting and decide if it's worth it for them. And that won't be based on the actual monetary value of what you're offering, but based on what they think it's worth specifically for them, because all they see is the collective price. I guess what I'm saying in an unbelievably bad roundabout way is that whereas with a commission or item sale, both you and the customer know exactly what the price is for the thing you're selling. But with Patreon, only you know the actual value, and the customer gets to essentially estimate the value of all the things bundled together. And all they see is that you're charging $20 for all of that. So they assume that the worth of all of those things is $20. Whereas in reality, that price is lowered to attract them to purchase a monthly subscription rather than a single purchase. Because of that, it's received significantly worse when the prices are raised because the value is perceived so nebulously and differently between the buyer and the seller. That's another inevitable part of being a professional artist, and the value a customer puts on what you offer will never always be what you charge for it. And that's their problem, and not a reason to not raise your prices or charge what you're worth. But it's really the combination of these problems that, to me, makes Patreon so ineffective for small creators. Because individually, these small problems are just small problems. They're inevitable things that you'll have to deal with. But Patreon combines them in a very specific and detrimental way, by no fault of Patreon's own, if it's not approached very carefully. On its own, the disadvantage to having to sell your art without a following isn't a reason not to do it. It's part of building your business. On its own, offering more for less to compete is just a part of building your business. On its own, having to raise prices and deal with customer outrage over time is just a part of building your business. But if you combine all of these in this particular environment, it can really snowball your business dangerously into a pattern of undercharging, overworking yourself, and burning yourself out, and then being put in a position where it's really difficult to solve those problems. Which ultimately takes me back to what I said before, which is that in my opinion, the best way to approach Patreon is to only do what you're comfortable with, not offer too much in order to compete with other creators, and accept that it might be a long time before you see any real income from the platform. Patreon does suck for smaller creators when they fall into the cycle that I discussed, but you don't have to fall into it. You can build your following while on Patreon without falling into it if you just accept that what you make from it will grow as your following does. It can be really, really tempting to fall into the mentality of trying to make more by offering more, but it just doesn't turn out well in my experience, certainly not sustainably. So in conclusion, what I'm saying is not that small creators shouldn't use Patreon or other similar monthly subscription-based platforms, just that when getting into them, I think that the safest and most sustainable expectation from it would be to only expect real income from it once you're not that small of a creator anymore. It can still be a valuable tool with which to build your following, but you only start to reap the real benefits from it once that following starts being built. So it's important not to be discouraged by disappointing numbers in the beginning, and not to devalue yourself and your art in order to make those numbers less disappointing. Okay, that's my long-winded rant about why Patreon, in my opinion, isn't particularly effective for small creators. Or really, why approaching Patreon in a certain way isn't particularly effective for creators. I'm sure you all have varying opinions on this, and I would honestly love to hear them. I don't use Patreon anymore, but I do use Ko-fi now that they've introduced monthly subscriptions and other features. And I'm always open to learning new and better ways to make that work despite being a small creator, so if you're here to tell me I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong. I want to be wrong. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be making one small exception to my usual plan of letting you guys vote on the next week's video, and that's so that I can make a really self-indulgent one this week. I'll still be making a Twitter poll for you guys to vote on in this video's description for the next topic, but the winning topic will actually be used for the video after that, because the next one I'll be posting will be fan art speed paints of my favorite YouTuber and VTubers mascots. There's been a lot of negativity in the art community lately, and while I enjoyed making my last video, it was certainly on the more negative side too. And while not all of the YouTubers and VTubers I'll be drawing are part of the art community, most of them are, and I just thought it would be nice to make some cute art for them and bring a little positivity by giving a brief little summary of each one and why I enjoy their content as much as I do. We're bringing that positivity, boys, whether you like it or not, and you better like it. It's positivity, that's the whole point. Also, before I wrap this video up, don't forget that my giveaway for a Vake S640 tablet is still going on. You have until January 31st to enter, which you can do by commenting "anime was a mistake" on my Problems with the Art Community video, which will be linked in the description, the card above, and the outro. Like, you have to make an actual real effort to miss it. You can also find more information about the tablet itself and the giveaway rules in the first 2 minutes of that video, so please check it out if you want to learn more. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.